Hey everyone, Michael here from Night Noon Games, and today we're going to go over how to convert 5e monsters into Shadowdark. And what is the reason that I'm covering this today? Well, that is because I'm working with Jeff Stevens Games to convert his module Figgy Puddin Steals Christmas. This campaign is currently live on Kickstarter and ends November 19th, so if you're interested, head over to the Kickstarter campaign and make your pledge today. There's going to be a link down in the description below for this. Let's get started converting these monsters from Figgy Puddin Steals Christmas from their 5e stats into Shadowdark. The tool I'm going to use for this is actually a free tool that I've developed and is available over on my itch page. There's a link down in the description below. It is the unofficial Shadowdark monster list. Essentially what this is every monster from Shadowdark RPG, and it's taken the stats and put it in each cell of an Excel sheet here. This is great because it allows you to look at a lot of monsters at once and do all sort of sorting with them. The version available on itch is pay what you want, and it has all of the monsters from the core rules included. This version that I'm using here has all of the monsters from the Curse Scrolls as well, but because those are not part of the Shadowdark third-party license, I can't actually distribute those. But even just having those core rules monsters available can be a really, really helpful resource for you when you're making your own monsters. We'll start at the top of the list with animated armor. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do when converting 5e monsters into Shadowdark monsters is see if maybe animated armor already is a monster within Shadowdark, because if it is, we can just use that. So I'm just going to do a little Control F, animated armor, boom. And since this is in the core rules and is part of the third-party license, I can just use this monster as is in my conversion. Now you can see that I've already done this here with one monster, the Tinsel Swarm, just to have something on the page, but we're going to get this started with the animated armor. So I'm just going to paste that right in there. And I think it's probably pretty good because I think animated armor is usually pretty much the same across different systems. But we'll just see if this has any extra things that we might need to add for a special flavor of animated armor. This is a great opportunity to look at 5e stats and understand what I like about Shadowdark because it's so succinct. So we know that animated armor is created magically. And here in the 5e stat block, it talks about how it's susceptible to anti-magic because of that. This whole block right here that says the armor is incapacitated in an area of anti-magic field. If targeted by dispel magic, the armor must succeed on a constitution saving throw. I think that that's just not necessary for Shadowdark because that is implied knowing that this is a magical object. Of course, dispel magic is going to have an effect on it. Of course, an anti-magic field is going to have an effect on it. So to me, there's really no reason that we need to have that in a stat block for Shadowdark. And the other item here is false appearance. When standing still, it looks exactly like a suit of armor. I think first one, checked off the list. Animated armor, done, great. Let's move on to the Bandit Captain. Is there an equivalent Shadowdark monster? That's the first place we're going to start looking. So Bandit, and we're just going to take that stat block and move it into Figgy Pudding. Now the Bandit Captain's challenge rating here in 5e is a 2. So we know he needs to be a little bit more beefed up than we would see here in Shadowdark, where the level of a regular old bandit is just a level 1. How I'm going to do this is I'm just going to bump up all the stats so I can get this to probably a level 3, maybe 4. I think that's an appropriate place for a Bandit Captain. And remember, in Shadowdark, the level of the monster is roughly equivalent to the level of players. A level 4 Bandit Captain should be roughly equal in prowess to 4 level 1 Shadowdark characters. So, Bandit Captain, the source is Figgy Pudding, leader of a group of bandits. It's probably pretty good there. So I think if a regular bandit has an AC of 13, this Bandit Captain's probably wearing some better armor, so I'm going to say it's 15. For the HP, I've actually pasted a formula in here because in Shadowdark, the HP that a monster has is their level times 4.5, which is the average of a D8, which is the hit die used for monsters in Shadowdark, and then also adding the Constitution 1 time. So right now that's going to read 0, but the formula can update as we go. As for Bandit Captain, what kind of attack should they have? They should probably have a sword. And since they're a little bit of higher level, it's going to be +3. That's going to do 1d6. And then a short bow, I think that's great. They're just going to have a +2 to it instead of a +0. Then, of course, the movement, because these guys aren't going to be that much faster than a regular bandit, but they're going to have a higher strength, a little bit of higher dexterity. Well, their constitution probably is a little higher. Their intelligence is a little higher. The wisdom, probably a little higher. The charisma, it's probably just as low as a regular bandit. They're going to be chaotic, and we're making them a level 4. You can see in the AP field here, when I went from 0 to 4, that spits out at 19 hit points. So if I want to do a little more due diligence, I can take this level 4 Bandit Captain and compare it to other level 4 creatures as well. So I have this sorted all by level 4, and you can see like roughly their HP in 19, 20 range. Their AC for most level 4 characters seems to be a little bit less than 15. So maybe I should bump that down to 14, which I'll do right now. Most of these monsters are getting +3, +2, +1, and have some sort of special abilities like grab and things like that. Being a bandit captain, I don't think they're going to have any sort of special abilities other than what a bandit already has, which is ambush. Deal an extra die of damage when undetected. A special ability that a bandit captain has in the 5e version of this monster is multi-attack. I think that is what we did see a lot of in these level 4 monsters, is a lot of them have 2 claws or 2 tears. So that is probably something we need to add on to this bandit captain as well. So I've changed this to 2 sword +3. It looks like the bandit captain has some other special abilities too. Parry, the captain adds 2 to the AC against one melee attack that it would be hit. I think this is a really cool ability for 5e. It takes a reaction and you get to add 2 to your AC when you're able to see an attacker coming at you and you're wielding a weapon. Since reactions aren't really a thing in Shadowdark, I think I'm just going to skip that because we've already boosted the AC, the Bandit Captain anyways. One thing I did notice here is that it's a scimitar specifically that they wield, so why not change that in the stats to scimitar? It's a little better than just a generic sword, I think. All right, next up is Figgy Puddin herself. I think I'm going to save that one for later. Since that's the big fight, I don't want to get that out of the way quite yet. The Gingerbread Golem. So this is maybe one of my favorite creatures in this adventure. I don't want to give too much away, but it's really fun how these gingerbread golems come into existence. And you'll find out more about that if you read this adventure or play through it yourself. So gingerbread golem to challenge level 1. So that's going to be pretty low. The animated armor was also a challenge level 1. So we're probably going to be looking at a level 1 or potentially I'm going to first look at other golems and see what they're like. You can see these golems are level 8, 10, 7, 8. So it's not going to be like a 1-for-1 that we can make a gingerbread golem out of one of these golems. However, I am going to use maybe some of the abilities from one of these golems. So I'm just going to copy and paste this into my spreadsheet here. Just for reference, it'll be easier to look up later. And then I'm also going to look at level 2 monsters to compare this to. So I've got a sorting where they're all level 2 here. And I'm going to find something that reminds me of a gingerbread golem, like what their abilities might be. And I think the first one jumps out at me is the Berserker. Because when I think Berserker, someone that is enraged and has this drive to battle, this gingerbread golem, we look at its intelligence here and we can tell that it's not that smart. So I think it makes sense to compare it to a Berserker type character. We can look at a cultist too, to just kind of give us another frame of reference for what level 2 characters are going to look like. Now it's time to start building this character. Gingerbread golem. A gingerbread person came to life, and they're not too happy about it. As for the AC, when we're looking at the flesh golem, it's actually only 9 AC, even though it's level 7. I think that's where we should draw inspiration for this gingerbread golem, because at the end of the day, it's just made of gingerbread. It's kind of a weak substance, isn't it? Then for the HP, we can see that I'm copying and pasting my formula back in here, and you can see the gingerbread golem has a lot of abilities here, and we're really going to shrink those down. One thing about this adventure, if you are a 5e player, I think it's really cool that what Jeff has done here is he's added notes into the adventure itself that tells you, hey, if your average party level is higher, buff up these monsters. And there's other situations in the adventure as well that it tells you, hey, if your party is stronger than low level, here's what you can do to make this a little bit more challenging for them. One of my goals with converting this adventure is to capture the Shadowdark vibe and adhere to its design principles and the design principles of OSR games in general. One of those principles is there isn't always a fair fight. So I don't see the need to make adjustments within the adventure itself, because if a party is in over their heads, it's up to them whether they want to run away from the situation, or it might force them to do something other than battle. And I think that's really part of the special sauce that makes OSR games so much fun. So we'll look at the attacks first for this gingerbread golem. They have Slam, Doe Toss, Abnormal Golem only, and Petrifying Gaze. The gingerbread golem spews liquid glaze. Oh, it's petrifying glaze, which is very funny. Spews liquid glaze icing from its mouth while targeting one creature it can see within 30 feet of it. The target must succeed on DC 12 dexterity saving throw or be coated with sticky icing and restrained until its next turn. All right, so this is level 2, so it's probably only going to have one attack. Slam, 1, do, toss, or petrifying glaze. They're going to move near. I think they're pretty weak, so they're probably going to be more in line with a cultist than they will be with a berserker. These stats aren't too far off from what Shadowdark are. The strength, dex, con, int, whiz, and charisma. So in this case, I actually might just carry those over. So it's a 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. We see here that the gingerbread golem is a neutral creature. So that means they're going to be neutral here too. And we're making them level 2. And you can see that the HP updated automatically to 9. Whoops, I forgot to put how much damage Slam's going to do. This is going to be a +2, but it's only going to be a 1d6, I think. First, we're going to define Petrifying Glaze. In the module itself, this is defined as the gingerbread golem spews liquid glaze icing from its mouth while targeting one creature it can see within 30 feet of it. The target must succeed on a DC 12 saving throw or be coated with sticky icing. We know this is 1 a day, near, target, coated in icing, DC 12, let's say Dex, Petrifying Glaze. That's sort of the Shadowdark version of it that I just came up with. And then Dough Toss, which is specific to an altered type of the gingerbread golem, the abnormal golem. And I don't think I've seen something like this in a Shadowdark monster before, so I don't have something to directly compare it to. I think that we can just bring it straight in as another weapon. Ranged weapon, 3 to hit, 1d8 +1, bludgeoning damage. All right, here's how we do it. +2, 1d8. I'm going to put it in attack, only available to abnormal golems. And you know what? I'm just going to move this back into the attack area. There we go. I think that looks much better and makes a little more sense. So it might be a little confusing since someone would have to make sure to read the entire stat block, but in Shadowdark, these stat blocks are like this big, so I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. Now, does the gingerbread golem need any of these extra abilities here? False appearance. When it's motionless, it looks like an ordinary gingerbread person. I think that's pretty obvious if you are running an OSR game, and that's a call for the GM to adjudicate. Harmed by liquid, the gingerbread golem takes 5 acid damage when it starts its turn in liquid or is hit by an attack involving liquid. We might want to add that. But again, is that kind of obvious? When liquid touches bread, does it just dissolve on its own? I think that might be another item for the GM to adjudicate on rather than to prescribe that. Now, immutable form is an interesting one because this one would not be obvious that a golem can't be affected by a spell or an effect that would alter its form. So I think I'm just going to take that directly from the adventure and copy it as an ability, immune to any spell or effect that would alter its form. I think that's great. And then there's unusual nature. The gingerbread golem doesn't require food or air. I think that's pretty obvious. And then tinsel strength. The gingerbread golem has advantage on attack rolls against a creature covered in tinsel. That is something that will come up, and I'm going to make sure to note it as an ability. There we go. And I think we're done with the gingerbread golem. As we move on, the next monster we want to convert is the Knight. This is another one of those monsters that we can find a Shadowdark version of already, and this is in the core rules, so we'll just be able to use that directly in our adventure fit for Figgy Pudding. Are there any special abilities that we might want to add? Leadership, great sword, heavy crossbow, multi-attack. I think this is pretty much where it needs to be. So that one's pretty easy. Done and dusted. Next up, we have a Shield Guardian. So in this adventure, there are different options you can use when playing 5e to make it more difficult if your party is of higher level. In this case, the Shield Guardian stat block is here because there is an animatronic Santa. If it's a lower level party, the animatronic Santa uses the stat block of the animated armor. And then if you want to beef up the encounter a bit, it suggests that you use the Shield Guardian stat block. I've looked through the Shadowdark monsters, and there isn't really anything that is exactly the equivalent of a Shield Guardian. So I've got another trick up my sleeve that's going to help me determine what we're going to use as a method of comparison. So as you can see here, I've pulled up the D&D 5th edition system resource document. Now this is the document that Wizards of the Coast released into the public domain that has a ton of stuff that anyone can use if you just give credit to Wizards of the Coast. In this case, we know the Shield Guardian is a challenge 7, so I'm searching for 7 challenge creatures. So a stone giant is challenge 7, a Ani is challenge 7, the Shield Guardian, of course, a giant ape is challenge 7, a young black dragon, a copper dragon, a stone giant. So that's kind of the realm in which we're playing in when we're looking for what the equivalent monsters want to be. So let's take a look at the stone giant in Shadowdark. And here we have the stone giant listed. So I'm just going to take that and copy it on over. And Oni was also another similarly leveled monster. So I'm going to take that as well to use for comparison. These are levels 8 and 7. So that tells me where we want the Shield Guardian to be roughly. The Shield Guardian in this case is going to be used for the beefed up animatronic Santa. As for the AC, since it is animatronic, since it is metal, I think it's going to be kind of higher. We're going to split the difference here. We're going to put that at 15. I'm pasting in the formula. If you want to see the formula, it kind of looks like this. So it would be, in this case, 14, but O column, which is the level, times plus J6, which is the constitution. As for its attacks, we're going to look at the stat sheet here. Fist. It makes 2 fist attacks, 2 fist. I'm going to make that plus 6, and that'll do 1d10 as well. I think that's a good place to put that. And it doesn't really have any other abilities. It doesn't have a spell ability. So because of that, I'm actually going to make it closer to the stone giant and make it 2d8 instead of 1d10. Just because with the Ani, it has more options when it comes to fighting. Then, of course, the distance is near. And then I think we can just take these stats straight out of the 5e stat block. 4, -1, 4, -2, 0, -4. The alignment on a line, so in Shadowdark terms, that would be neutral. The level is probably more beefy, especially since the attacks mirror that of the stone giant. But the AC is also lower, so I think this is a level 7. He's going to have 37 hit points. The Shield Guardian regains 10 hit points at the start of the turn if it has at least 1 hit point. Since this stat block isn't necessarily meant to be an animatronic Santa, I'm going to skip the spell story mechanic altogether. But I do like this regeneration. I'm going to see if there's anything like that in the other Shadowdark monsters we can compare it to. So how I'll do this is just go to this spreadsheet, this tab, and you can see the Tesseract has an ability called Regeneration. Regains 40-10 lost hit points at the beginning of its turn. So I'm going to pull that into the abilities here, and then I'm going to tune it down a little bit because Tesseract is super high level 30. So this is just going to be, I think, 2d6. I think that's fun. Now that I think about it, I don't know if that makes too much sense because essentially in the 5e stat block, it has 142 hit points. And if the Shield Guardian regains 10 hit points at the start of each of its turn when it has at least 1 hit point, that is such a small fraction. That's 1/14 of its total hit points. Whereas this, you could roll a 12 and that would be a third of its available hit points. So I think I'm just going to make this a d6. That's going to put the average regained at 3.5, which if I do my math correctly, that's about 10% of its hit points. So that's not too far off. And also thinking about it more, the Shield Guardian, if it's supposed to be a beefier version of the animated armor that we have here, I'm going to have to raise its AC a little bit. So let's go to 16. All right, Shield Guardian checked off the list. Next up, we have a spy. So we'll see if Shadowdark has anything equivalent. Searching for spy, nothing specifically for a spy. I wonder what we could use in place of a spy. The spy's challenge rating is only 1, so that's probably going to put this at a level 1 monster. Maybe we're just going to use the bandit, but add a little bit of spy flair. Actually, let's use the guard and we'll add a little bit of spy flair. Figgy Pudding. And I think we're just going to pretty much bring down most of the stats here. The AC is probably going to be a little bit lower because I see a spy as being a little more stealthy and less beefy than a guard. They're going to have 1 dagger. They're going to be able to move near. We can just pull these stats out of the 5e version. They're going to be neutral, and they'll be level 1. The spies here have some special abilities, so let's take a look at these. They also have a crossbow and a short sword. This +2. And the abilities they have are sneak attack and cunning action. So we'll say cunning action, advantage on checks to hide, disguise themselves. I think that's a pretty good way to describe cunning action. There's actually another ability called stealthy, which I think is what we're going for in cunning action. So I'm just going to use that instead. Stealthy. And then when it comes to the sneak attack, the spy deals an extra 7, 2d6 damage when it hits a target with a weapon attack and has advantage on the attack roll, or when the target is within 5 feet of an ally of the spy that isn't capacitated and the spy doesn't have advantage on the attack roll. I think we might use the ability that we had earlier with the Bandit Captain, the ambush ability. I think this is really more similar to the vibe of Shadowdark and what we're going for. So we're going to give that to the spy as well. And we're done with the spy. Next up, stone golem. Didn't we look at a stone golem already? Oh, we looked at a flesh. Oh, giant stone golem. That one's already taken care of for us. The swarm of silver tintle. That's something that I already did stat out, which I think is a pretty fun Christmas themed monster. It has the sparkle ability, which can blind people with its white light. And it has the swarm death, so it explodes with tintle when it's killed. And that's why you saw with another monster earlier, I think it was the gingerbread golem. They have tinsel strength, has advantage on attack rolls against creature covered in tinsel. So that could be a really fun situation that the player characters get into. Next up, we have a thug and a veteran. Now, I think there might be Shadowdark equivalents for these too. There's the thug, so we'll just port that right over. And for the veteran, there's an exact equivalent in Shadowdark that I know of. So I'm just going to look at the level 3 characters to see if there's anything we can steal from. Maybe the gladiator might be an option. The knight is similar level to the veteran. So we have the veterans, their challenge is 3. And what was the knight's challenge? It was also 3. So I think those are some pretty comparable monsters. I think I'm going to take the gladiator and adapt that. I definitely think that they're going to have a pretty decent AC here. And then when it comes to attacks, listed here, they have a short sword, a heavy crossbow, and a long sword. I don't think they need 2 types of sword and a heavy crossbow. So I'm going to reduce this down to the long sword and the crossbow. And that's a 1d6. And I think that their stats are going to be pretty similar. I'll say 2. Let's say they're a veteran, maybe they're a little smarter and a little bit wiser. But I think they're a little grizzled, so their charisma is a little bit lower. Otherwise, they're neutral. Are they neutral? Let's take a look at the stat block. Any alignment. So they're probably more neutral than not. That's going to be level 3. But they don't have any abilities, so we're good there. All right, now finally, the last monster we're going to take care of is Figgy Puddin herself. Figgy Puddin's backstory essentially is that she was a jester that traveled the land, spreading Christmas spirit, and then became disillusioned when she realized that Santa didn't even know who she was or appreciate anything she did for him and the children of the world. And the plot hook, essentially, for this adventure is she's stolen all of the presents in the town and is holding them ransom for enough money to retire on. And of course, she has a Christmas-themed bunker, which is a dungeon that you have to crawl through in order to get to her and the presents. Taking a look at the Figgy Puddin stat block, the first thing I'm looking for is the challenge rating, because that'll help me determine what kind of level they're going to be at relatively in Shadowdark. Here it says challenge 1, and I wonder if it's actually supposed to be challenge level 10, which I think would make sense for the, boss villain in this adventure. So I'm going to go back to the SRD, like we talked about before, and we're going to look up challenge 10. The Aboleth is challenge 10. The Angels are challenge 10. A Young Red Dragon's challenge 10. A Gold Dragon challenge 10. A Stone Golem is also challenge 10, which we already have as the adventure. And then a Naga is also challenge 10. Let's take a look. I think there's an Aboleth and a Stone Golem that we can look at. So both of those characters level 8 in Shadowdark. So I actually did screw this up here a little bit. And the challenge level for Figgy Puddin is actually supposed to be level 1 in 5e. So since I made this video, I've gone back and I've adjusted the Shadowdark level of Figgy Puddin to be level 2, which gives her 10 HP. And I guess that's because she doesn't act up in the fray and she's working on keeping her distance and using her spells that way. So that's an update for you. A jester's Christmas spirit has turned black as coal. So looking at the stat block up here, it looks like at the higher levels, Figgy Puddin does have studded leather armor. And I think that'll be I think that's a good thing to put her in here. For hit points, we're just going to use that formula that I usually use. Now attack, Figgy Puddin has a Christmas scepter, or uses one of its abilities, or word pain, or casts a spell. So I'll just start with Christmas scepter. And it's going to be plus, we'll say 6 to hit, and it'll do 1d8 damage. Or it can use one of its abilities. So I'm going to say 1 Christmas scepter, or word pain, or 1 spell. And since bonus actions aren't a thing, I'm going to say eggnog healing is something that Figgy can just do on any turn additionally. And I think too, since these other characters that are level 8 have at least 2 attacks, I'm going to make Figgy have 2 attacks with the Christmas scepter as well. The movement is near for Figgy. And let's have a look at the stats in 5e. It's a -1 +3, +1 +1 +1 +4. I think that's reasonable. Chaotic, absolutely, and definitely level 8. Now we have this figure out her abilities here. For Word Pain, Figgy Puddin targets one creature she can see within 60 feet of her. The target must succeed on DC 14 Wisdom saving throw or take 5 psychic damage and have disadvantage on its next roll before the end of its turn. So we've got to definitely condense that a little bit to make it, Shadow Darkify it a bit. And we also have to take out that saving throw because saving throws aren't a mechanic in Shadow Dark. And that's because you roll for the spell as opposed to casting the spell automatically and having the target roll to avoid it or somehow lessen the damage done by it. Now, I know this is not a spell specifically, so it's a little bit different, and I'm just gonna make it happen. So 2d4 damage to creature within double near DC 14 Word Pain. 2d4 damage to creature within double near DC 14 Wisdom or disadvantage on attacks the following turn. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And it automatically does damage, but the average of 2d4 is only going to be 5. And Figgy can only use that once per turn in place of the 2 Christmas scepters. So the Christmas scepters are +6 in dealing 1d8 damage. The average for that is 4.5 each time with +6. There's a good chance she's going to hit pretty frequently on that. So I think that those are roughly even abilities. And then, of course, the DC 14 Wisdom check. Otherwise, the player who's been attacked has disadvantage on attacks the following turn. So I think that is a not overpowered ability. If Figgy only had one attack with the Christmas Scepter or Word Pain, I don't think there'd ever be an instance where Figgy would use the Scepter rather than Word Pain. But considering the trade-off is 2 Scepters versus 1 Word Pain, I think she could go either way on those. And then, of course, Eggnog Healing, 3-day, acts as potion of healing. Great. So that is taken care of there. And then the spells. So generally, you can see here, I'm just looking at the Goblin Shaman as an example. Spells in Shadowdark for monsters, they're not the same spells as you would see a player character being able to use. They're usually different. And I think the design philosophy behind that is monsters are a little bit unknown. They're a little bit strange. They're a little bit weird. And so they can do things and they have access to certain powers and magics that player characters don't have the ability to access. So that's why if you were looking in any of the rule books, this one's the Goblin Shamans and the core rules. If you go through the spell lists, you're not going to see any Bug Brain or Skitter or Stink Bomb. These are all just totally unique to the monsters. Now, if we look at the 5e stats here, Figgy Puddin has Color Spray, Fairy Fire, Mage Hand, Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, Hypnotic Pattern. And those are all spells that player characters can learn in 5e. And I think at least a handful of those are also in Shadowdark as well. So I'm going to take the essence of what I feel those spells are and then make them into something for Shadowdark. And I guess first we have to determine what kind of spellcaster Figgy Puddin is. And since Figgy's charisma is +4, I'm going to assume that she is casting spells in Shadowdark using her charisma. So here I've pulled up the SRD, and you can see Color Spray. There's so much that's going on in there. A dazzling array of flashing colored light springs from your hand. Roll 60-10. The total is how many hit points of creatures this spell can affect. Creatures in a 50-foot cone originating from you are affected in ascending order of their current hit points, ignoring unconscious creatures and creatures that can't see. This is already a mouthful, and we haven't even read a third of this yet, because there's all of this information up here and down here. Starting with the creature that has the lowest hit points, each creature affected by the spell is blinded until the spell ends. Subtract each creature's hit points from the total before moving on to the creature with the next lowest hit points. A creature's hit points must be equal to or less than the remaining total for the creature to be affected. At higher levels, when you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, roll an additional 2d10 for an extra slot level above 1st. That is crazy. There's so much there. So I'm going to change that from color spray to dazzling lights, charisma spell. So the essence of this is Figgy throws up flashing colored lights, blinding people. And it has this weird mechanic where it only affects people with the lowest hit points first and then moves up. I'm just going to say all creatures within near DC 15 con or blinded for 1d4 turns. Oh, it's until the spell ends even. So I think this is going to be a focus spell as well. There we go. Dazzling Lights, charisma spell. Near, focused, DC 15 con, or blinded for duration. There we go. I think that puts a button on that. All right, next up, the next spell that Figgy has is Fairy Fire. So looking through the SRD to find Fairy Fire. A little bit shorter. That's always nice. Each object in a 20-foot cube within range is outlined in blue, green, or violet light, your choice. Any creature in the area, when the spell is cast, is also outlined in light if it fails a dexterity saving throw. For the duration, objects and affected creatures shed dim light for 10 in a 10-foot radius. Any attack roll against the affected creature or object has advantage if the attacker can see it, and the affected creature or object can't benefit from being invisible. I'm just going to call this one Fairy Fire since there is not a Fairy Fire spell within Shadowdark, so I don't think that this is going to be too crazy. It's going to be focus. Once again, all objects radiate light for 10 feet. Creatures DC to another 15. What kind of saving throw do they have here? Dex or glow as well. All right. The next spell that Figgy Puddin has is Mage Hand. There is no Mage Hand spell within Shadowdark, so I feel comfortable just making this Mage Hand. A spectral hand appears at a point you choose within range. The hand lasts for the duration until you dismiss it in action. The hand vanishes if it is ever more than 30 feet from you or you cast the spell again. Mage Hand, charisma spell, near, duration is 6 rounds. How do they describe it? A spectral hand appears and does your bidding. I think that's pretty much encapsulate Mage Hand. Then we have once per day, Hideous Laughter, Old Person, and Hypnotic Patter. Hideous Laughter. A creature of your choice that you can see within range perceives everyone as hilariously funny and falls into a fit of laughter if the spell affects it. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or fall prone, become incapacitated, and unable to stand up for the duration. A creature with an intelligence score of 4 or less isn't affected. At the end of each of its turns, and each time it takes damage, the target can make another wisdom saving throw. All right. Hideous Laughter, charisma spell, near, DC 15. Charisma? Wisdom. Target may roll again at the end of each turn. So that means if you're hit by this, and the reason why I think this is okay in Shadowdark design philosophy, which usually doesn't have something like saving throws, I actually think I need to tweak it to make sure that it is compatible there. I think this just succeeds. It's going to say target incapacitated by laughter. Target may roll DC 15, whiz, and turn to come 2. So the reason why I think this is more in line with the design philosophy of Shadowdark is there aren't saving throws. And essentially, if Figgy Puddin succeeds on casting the spell, that one target is just going to lose 1 turn no matter what. And it's up to them to roll successfully this wisdom check at the end of their turn, so they wouldn't be able to take any actions to come out of it. And if they fail, they're going to get hit again, and it's going to be another turn and so on. So this is a pretty powerful spell, but also Figgy Puddin is a pretty powerful creature. The next spell she has is Old Person. And I actually have a similar list of spells here. You can tell it's sort of a similar format to my other spreadsheet, but this is the unofficial Shadowdark spell list. And there's going to be a link down below in the description. If you want to see me make a more thorough spell making video, I actually have a few different techniques for that. And I think it might make a good video. But if you agree, let me know in the comments below. The player version of Old Person, you magically paralyze one humanoid creature of level 4 or less you can see within range. It's tough because it'd be easy to just copy and paste this and use it, because there's only so many other ways that you can sort of make a Hold Person spell happen. But now that I'm thinking about it, is Hold Person really that different from Hideous Laughter if it incapacitates a target? And I kind of think that it's not. So I'm going to, and I guess the difference here is this is 1 a day. And I guess that's the difference there. There are two different spells. Yeah, once per day. There are two different spells, and they only can each be used once. So I can either change Hideous Laughter to 2. I'm going to just change Hideous Laughter to 2 a day, since I think it's more on theme than Hold Person is. So Hideous Laughter is going to go in there at 2 a day. And then the last spell that Figgy Puddin has is Hypnotic Pattern. Hypnotic Pattern, you create a twisting pattern of colors that weaves through the air inside a 30-foot cube within range. The pattern appears for a moment and vanishes. Each creature in the area who sees the pattern must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the creature becomes charmed for the duration. Well charmed by this spell, the creature is incapacitated and it has a speed of 0. The spell ends if an affected creature takes any damage. Okay. So I think this is going to, I'll steal the name, but I'm going to kind of rewrite the spell a little bit. So Hypnotic Pattern, Charisma spell, near, focus. And you don't want to just realize I'm forgetting to put the levels in here too, so we got to go back and add that. So I think this is sort of similar to Hideous Laughter, but it's a little more powerful. The downside is that it would affect anyone within near. Hypnotic Pattern. Charisma spell, DC 15 once a day, near, focused. All creatures are captivated by swirling colors and charms for duration. Taking damage wakes creature from trance. There we go. I think that's pretty good. And is there anything left for Figgy Puddin? They have this ability to parry and deflect, which we decided previously we weren't going to use. Nimble Escape doesn't really make any sense for Shadowdark because there is no attacks of opportunity. I think we're done statting on Figgy Puddin. And that is the last of the monsters for the Figgy Pudding adventure. So to recap, we have the Tinsel Swarm. We've got the Bandit Captain. There is the Gingerbread Golem, the Knight, the Stone Giant, the Shield Guardian, the Spy, the Thug, and the Veteran. Well, I hope you liked this video going over how to convert 5e characters into Shadowdark. If you would have done something differently, please let me know down in the comments. And check out the Kickstarter campaign for Figgy Puddin Steals Christmas. It's live on Kickstarter until November 19th, and I think you're really going to like it, especially because I'm making a Shadowdark version of it. So until our next adventure, stay inspired and keep those dice rolling. Thanks for watching.